What happens when you get a bunch of vape reviewers in the same room? Humor, debates, feels, tutorials, jokes, utter chaos. Wednesdays at 9 p.m. EST. The homepage and reviewers everywhere present a brand new show. The Review at thehomepage.com/live.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're a...
Gotcha.
For
Welcome
those of
to
you
the
that,
Hazard, Joe.
yeah,
Hey,
that's just
my mic's
Matt's
unmuted.
thing. Anytime he has to run an intro, he's got to do something fucked up, doesn't he?
No, but I got it working right in the middle of it, right? It did go the right direction.
Yeah, it went the right direction. So for those of you that noticed the words backwards, you aren't high. Tonight we are going to do a pretty cool episode on the DNA 40. We got some guests with opinions that are basically all over the spectrum. So let's jump right into it and introduce everybody. Basil, why don't you go first? Tell us a little about yourself. Tell us what you're vaping on and what
That's
you're
a lot
wearing.
of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. So, hey, what's happening? I'm Basil Ray. I unmuted my microphone, I believe.
Yes.
That's how this works. I have in front of me an assortment of DNA 40 devices, all set up with nickel. I have two flasks, one with an Inax, one with a marquee. I have an E7 Sunbox set up with mesh and nickel, and I have a Hannah here. I don't have anything on it right now. And I've got a BAP with a dual coil dripper set up with cotton. So I'm living the DNA 40 life pretty hard over here.
Do you want to tell everybody about your channel a little bit?
Candy just put the link to your channel.
Yeah, I could. Occasionally, I put out videos, and lately it has been occasionally. Not terribly plentiful, but if you're struggling with DNA 40 builds, I do have some stuff that will probably help you over there. So feel free to head over there, especially if you're trying to build like an Inax, some dual coil drippers, what have you. There's a couple that will probably get you on your way.
Word?
Yeah, I think you have some of the best DNA 40 build videos out there. I've followed along with a few of them. Mast, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what you're vaping on?
All right, I'm Mass Blast 09 from that crazy-ass show, The Plumes of Hazard. I am a modder by trade here, and I am vaping on my DNA 40 iStick. No, BAP didn't do it first. I did, so y'all can shut up. And I have, it's a joke, I have the Derringer on top, and I'm vaping on, actually, I don't know if he wants it mentioned because he's going to get slammed with it, but this is actually Stash E-Liquids. And the name of the juice is PB&J. Now, it isn't up for sale. You could ask for it, but I'll tell you what. I'm big into when you taste the juice, the inhale, the exhale, the aftertaste, and damn if this isn't some peanut butter and jelly. So that's what I'm vaping on right now. Next.
I have yet to try a decent PB&J juice, so I'm gonna have to pick some of that up.
Peanut butter can be tricky.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he does the peanut butter on one of the flavors that's called Suspicious Minds, and it's a peanut butter banana.
Yeah.
And when he first told me about that, not to take up too much time, but when he first told me about that, I was like, all the peanut butters that I've tried are like a wet peanut butter, and somehow he's able to do the peanut butter where it's a light, like a peanut butter dust. If that makes any sense, when you taste the peanut butter dust like on top of a pie, and nice and light. So he's using the same I guess recipe for this PB&J, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, to the point now that I just I hadn't vaped on it for a few hours, and I came in and it smells like there's a like you have left a PB&J sandwich just out of the toaster, just sitting there on your plate. It's pretty interesting. So.
Are
So
you
how
one of
much-
those weird people that toast their peanut butter and jellies? Oh.
Dude, you gotta toast peanut butter and jelly. What I want to know is how much money Mast got paid to just give that company a commercial for a minute.
Hashtag zero kickbacks. So,
Robert, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, what you're vaping on?
Okay, Robert Ellis, I'm the Arm Vapor. I do have a YouTube channel. Look at my little moniker there. It's there. So I do reviews and I do live show on my own channel on vapors.tv. What am I vaping on? Well, let's see. I've got several different setups here to keep me satisfied during the show, but I'm also running 2 DNA 40s with the latest Kanger products on them with their temperature sensing coils. Just to show solidarity, I guess. So, there you go.
I have some of those sub-tank heads, and they are really good. I wasn't expecting them to be because the Aspire ones sucked quite a bit, the Nautilus ones, but the sub-tank ones are really good. Angsty, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, what you're vaping on?
Sure thing. My name is the Angstful Vapor, or Angsty. I am one of the hosts of the Plumes of Hazard with Mass Blast over there. We have a good time most of the time, and I'm really excited to be on here tonight. I've got in front of me my absolute favorite setup of all time, which is my Mass Mods Micro with a rose with raspberry mint in it.
God, I want to click that rose button.
It's funny. The same ding for a mute just happened in my IRC because Candy mentioned me. I was like, oh shit, I got muted.
No, that's
okay,
guests. We're guests here today.
So got that. I actually have a new thing that I'm testing out today. I just picked up an Aqua V2, and I'm playing with that guy on my DZ, which is both of those are DNA 30s, and then I've got my 2 DNA 40s. Since we're talking about this on the show, both of these running nickel. I've got one. My Derringer is wrapped with nickel with my brand new. Nobody's got one jump tap on it, which I'm very excited about, and a K-Fun running. It's a .18 K-Fun, which I never thought I'd be vaping on until I've been playing with the DNA 40. Pretty decent, and we're good. I'm dripping Lab Rat Baked Blue.
So let's jump into it here.
Wait, you gotta say who you are.
Well,
Yeah.
Everybody knows who I am. I'm just the boring. What did you say? Guy made out of wax mask?
You're the wax figure always wearing a hat.
I'm the wax figure host, and I am vaping on a Vapor Shark DNA 40 with a sub-tank mini and a BAP with the Delta 2 and some other shit. So good enough.
Very descriptive.
I think the best thing to do is just, for those that don't have a DNA 40 yet or don't know much about them, maybe kind of explain the technical side of it as far as the temperature sensing, because that's obviously its newest, biggest feature, and get a little bit technical about it. I think Mast and Basil would probably be best at that because they probably have the most experience with it. Mast, why don't you go ahead and go first and tell us about the temp sensing?
Me? I wasn't one of the beta testers. I don't know anything about this temperature control garbage.
We can start with Basil.
Sure.
No,
Okay, gladly. So, yes, I was one of the fortunate and often maligned beta testers for the DNA 40. We get a lot of flack.
No.
So, the principal concept behind the DNA 40, in some ways, you could say is it's not scientifically vetted out yet, right? So, as of late, there have been efforts to fund studies to figure out what happens to the breakdown of e-liquid when your wire temperature exceeds certain set temperature points, right? So the big one being just over 500 degrees is the flash point for vegetable glycerin. So the main concept behind the DNA 40 is to be able to use a coil that you can set to a certain temperature, and the board circuitry will kick in and ensure that your wire temp doesn't exceed that threshold.
Which I think is really important to know because a lot of people call it temperature control, and it's not, right? It's more of a limiting factor.
It really is more of a limit, right? So when you set that on the device, you are setting the maximum that the wire temperature should ever hit. Now, you may never come close to that, depending on your build, how you have it set, and what kind of wattage you're setting. So it's a different concept when you start thinking about wattage with the temperature control. The wattage isn't really your actual power delivery. It's really more of that middle point. So along with this, they introduced a preheat mode, which some people, like myself, I love the preheat mode. Some people, like Robert, despise it. They hate it, and that's fine. You're not obligated to like it. So the preheat mode is the first second of the firing duration, or until your wired temperature gets within 100 degrees of your set limit. So that's when it kicks in, and what will happen is that you will see your wattage generally exceeded. So if you're set to 10 watts, it will push as high as 40 and will put out an amperage of upwards of 20 amps of current to try and get you within 100 degrees of your temperature set point. From there, it will back down, and it should back down to your wattage setting, which is your median wattage, and that's where it will continue to fire as long as that's a sustainable wattage in tandem with your temperature set point. And then from there, if it goes to exceed the temperature set point, it will dial your wattage back as much as it can, and it should give you a message saying that you've been temperature protected. Or temperature limit. I forget.
Yeah, I think it's temperature protection.
Protected, isn't it?
The beta, they changed it from the beta to the regular, and I forget. I never look. I just stay there.
I'm glad you touched on the wattage thing, though, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people have been confused by is what role that plays. Mass, do you got anything else to throw in there as far as temperature sensing or limiting?
Yeah, and this is not direct from Evolve, but the way that it's doing that temperature protection, because a lot of people ask this. They say, do you have to have a special atty? Do you have to have a temperature probe going into the atty and all that other stuff? Is wrong. That you don't need any of that. You could basically build with your nickel wire, and that's really all you need to get this the DNAs into the temperature mode. One of the first things that you'll hear people complain about is, okay, I got my build, I put it on there, and I did it with nickel wire, and the DNA is not switching over into the temperature mode; it's staying in the voltage mode. Well, the first thing you would ask people is, okay, well, how low did you build that coil? And usually they'll say, oh, I'm closer to 0.18, 0.2, and with that, I usually tell people try to build lower to 0.1, which goes against everything that safety-minded people were talking about with building Canthal coils and stuff like that. So once you get a person down to that end, it starts working no problem. And the way that it's doing is using nickel wire. You can predict the resistance of the wire at certain levels and at certain temperatures, and that way build, if you would say per se, a chart or an algorithm that can actually figure, okay, this coil at this temperature, at this resistance will be firing at this temperature mixed in with your juice on the coil and air and all that other stuff. So I assume that they have gone through and done all of these tests on an atomizer and figured out within, and I believe that Brendan did say, I think based on, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he said within a 5-degree variance of the temperature. So they've gotten it really close, and that's one of the things that people first go, well, why can't I use Canthal? Well, with nickel, you basically have a written down on a sheet that says at this resistance, this coil will be producing this much energy or heat, so they can accurately get to that, so you can get a feedback on your board. So that number that you're seeing on your DNA board is not actually a temperature probe or anything actually on that coil. It's a mathematical equation. Figure that out by reading that resistance. This is why if you are building a mod, coming from a modder's perspective, you should really take care when you're doing a DNA 40 to make sure that the resistance to your 510 is as low as possible. With any other mods, you can get away with a lot of higher variances, but I know the board tries to correct a lot of that, and that's something that people always need to remember. You know, if you're buying a Vapor Shark, a Vapor Flask, all that other stuff that has these boards in them, you know, they're going to try to limit, you know, a lot of resistance issues, but they do happen. But that is one of the things that you should always watch out for. And the other is also, which we have been seeing more often, is temperature. The temperature that your device itself is at. So recently, in the DNA user group on Facebook, there was a post talking about what your device starts at. So the board, the DNA board itself, has a temperature sensing chip on it. So that way it can gain a baseline. Okay, so it says, okay, well, ambient temperature in this right now is 70 degrees, right? What that allows it to do is it allows it to do the calculation for where the temperature is on the coil. Okay, so I know it's very complicated and all that stuff, but why does that matter? That matters because if you have your mod in the car, and like for example down here in Florida, and it's, you know, 80 degrees in the car, and you know, the DNA is not necessarily on 24/7 watching that, but you bring it inside, you're still going to have residual heat. So that's why, and I explain this to people, that's why sometimes you'll see that your coil's firing fine and your coil reads at 0.08, and then sometimes it's reading at like 0.09 or something like that, and that's because there is residual heat on that atomizer. And
by the same token, too, cold climates. So I live in Minnesota, and you'll when you start to be exposed to cold ambient temperatures, you'll have some issues as well. And actually, something that just happened, so we'll throw it out there, is that the Vapor Shark RDNA40 is one of the few mods that's not using the Evolve charging board, which is fine, right? You're not obligated to use that. The charging board that they've procured produces quite a bit of heat into the body of the device. So whether you're using wireless charging or the zip charging, I think they're going to probably change chargers. I would be surprised if they don't in future runs, but it's causing excess heat in the device. So if you leave your RDNA40 to charge and you go to fire it, you may be dramatically exceeding what the device thinks the temperature
question is. I mean, certainly with mine, charging it wirelessly, coming off that charger, I mean, if you wait like overnight, it eventually, sitting on that little charging disc, it will be cool when you pick it up. But if you pick it up as soon as it's done charging, or very soon thereafter, that mod's hot. It's really hot. You really just got to let it cool down.
Yeah.
Or if you live in Minnesota, just chuck it outside for a minute.
That's true.
Yeah, right. Right?
Yeah. So that in I know I got into a long rant, but that is pretty much in a very condensed sense how the board is figuring out your temperature. So there isn't a probe. You don't need a special atomizer. Basically, it's doing it by looking at that resistance of that coil, as basic as possible.
Yeah.
Well, while we're talking about being in different climates and stuff, and that affecting the board, wasn't there some speculation a few months ago where people were saying that they were more likely to have problems with it in I think it was some of the colder temperature areas where like they had a way bigger percentage of boards being sent back. There was something
when we had Charlie from the Vapor Flask on the show, he said that they were seeing geographical sorts of patterns.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is that I had the first flask that I was sent by Charlie for review, had it, no problems, and I went to the Philippines, was there for a week, no problems. The minute I got home, back to Minnesota, it was 15 degrees outside. I was standing outside the airport waiting for my fiance to pick me up, and I was outside for less than 5 minutes, and I started having screen problems. It had been fine. It had been fine for a month, and the minute I was outside in that 15-degree weather, it glitched on me.
Yeah.
Let's jump away from some of the geeky shit for a little bit. My mind is blown already. But let's talk about from a user standpoint some of the pros and cons. Robert, I know that you had some pretty strong opinions on it. Why don't you start us off and tell us what the pros and cons are to you?
Oh man.
Where to begin, he says.
Yeah, I mean, I did put
Tell
out
us
that
how you
video.
feel, buddy. Unload on us.
I put out that video. I knew it was going to take a ton of heat on it, and I certainly fucking did, to the point where I was even kicked out of a Facebook group. But be that as it may, my personal bottom line is it doesn't provide me a satisfying vape. The closest I can get to a satisfying vape on a DNA 40 is actually with these like Kanger tanks with their, temperature sensing coils. They work rather well.
So let me just question what about it don't you find satisfying, or what do you feel like you're missing?
Okay. I like a warm, dense vape, and for me it was very difficult to achieve that in any format when I was wrapping coils. All right. Now, and I'll come back to that. I just want to also touch on what was mentioned before, and I seriously hate that freaking burst, okay, bullshit that's going on to preheat that coil. It annoys the living crap out of me. But, okay, now we'll come back to coil building. Tanks, jennies, drippers, you name it, I'm wrapping all these friggin' coils. And every time, I would watch this Facebook group, the DNA-TP group, and it seemed like every time people were having issues or had a complaint, the standard rhetoric that you were getting out of those people in the group was, you can't build for shit. It's your build. It's your fucking build. It's your fucking build. Okay. All right. It's my fucking build. All right. Great. So how do I build something that has to be totally 100% saturated all the goddamn time for this thing to work correctly? Apparently, Kangaroo's figured it out for me. Thank you. Why does something have to be so difficult? And the other thing that really chaps my ass is when this thing was released, it's like, oh, thank you for all the information, or actually non-information, as to how to go about this thing. It was total nonsense. This chip is released and nobody's told in the public, okay, or supply documentation from Evolve that this is how you should really go about doing things. If there wasn't information out there, you had to hunt around or be involved in some sort of group or something like that. It was like everybody had to handhold everybody else. This technology was released on the public, and we didn't know how to deal with it.
Devil's advocate, nobody taught you how to use a mech mod. There was no brochure on how to do it and how to wrap.
So we're going to fall back on that bullshit.
I'm just throwing it out there.
2014, 3 fucking months ago, this came out. Okay, will you at least concede that this chip was released prematurely to the public?
No.
Oh man,
seriously? I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Oh, so, come on.
I'm kind of I'm on the fence here, and I think Angsty is a little bit too with kind of my way of thinking. I'm with Robert. I do like a very dense, warm vape. I have been able to achieve that pretty easily with drippers after some practice. With tanks like K-Funds, it can be a little bit tricky. And I do agree there has been a sense of arrogance coming out of like the pro DNA camp and in those groups, to where, some people, including myself, we might not be building it right, but anytime anyone has said anything negative about it, they're jumped all over.
A little bit.
But at the same time, I appreciate the technology. I do think that it is the future, and so.
Don't get me wrong. I think the technology is stellar. I don't think this version of it is up to snuff. I think there's a technology in its infancy, and what's going to happen within even the next year with this technology could be something so stellar. And quite frankly, the only thing that's going to make me personally revisit this technology in wrapping coils and doing it myself in this current incarnation is when Dr. Farsalinos comes out with his study. If the study shows that if we vape above XYZ, whatever the range is, let's say this chipset will handle, that we're fucking killing ourselves, then I'm going to start wrapping nickel wire coils and going to nickel wire, because I don't want to hurt myself any more than necessary.
Right. That's why we quit smoking, right?
Exactly.
I'm completely on the same page.
So I know the technology is extremely promising, no question about it.
So
and it's
I guess my experience has been a lot different. And granted, I wasn't on the beta. Nobody in the beta said this is how you should or shouldn't wrap a coil, right? A lot of it was trial and error. So I fully admit that I had access to the technology well before anybody else did. So that probably gives me a leg up. That being said, there are some big differences in using nickel. It is not as prone to holding its shape as Canthol is, right? Especially when you start to get to those thicker gauges, and it makes it tricky. And you start, trying to compensate by using some of the heftier wire gauges. You start getting to 28. 26, I think, is the thickest gauge that I've seen. Yeah. And you need so much wire that you're never going to get that vape you look for.
You end up with a coil this friggin' long. How you jamming in your head?
Yeah. I've had to wrap specifically with 30 in order to run dual coils, at all. Without having an inch-long coil, it's got to be 30.
Yeah.
In pre-show, I wrapped a brand new 30-gauge dual coil in 2 seconds during pre-show, cottoned it up, and it's vaping just great.
Yeah, I do want to touch. I do want to touch on what Robert had mentioned, and I think about the group, and I think the reason that some of those comments were coming out of that group also was because I think that group should have been named something else. I think it should have been named DNA, temperature control, like electronics feedback or something for that group, because you have users that come in that are already, they've spent some serious money on these devices, okay? And they're having a really tough time wrapping a coil. Why? Just think about this. It's us having issues wrapping coils. Imagine a user that's only been vaping for, a month, 2 months, something like that, and they went and just got a DNA, okay? So they're already frustrated. They get into this group, and they post, I can't get this to work, can't get this going on. And I don't know 100% exactly, what the group is there for, but I think it started getting into a coil building group, okay? And how to build coils, and that was the question coming in one after the other. Now, I will agree, yes, some of the responses out of that group still to this day are a bit, you're a fucking asshole responses, okay? Because I see them all the time. I am in the group, and some of the people responding there, I sometimes say, man, people aren't going to want to come back, and all they're doing is just making them even more infuriated at their DNA device, which might have nothing wrong with it, and it could just be something that the person, is building the coils. First thing is everyone loves to have their coil spaced. Well, to this day, I'll tell you what, every nickel coil that I have built, I have torched, and I have done a microcoil around a 3mm screwdriver together, and never spaced, and it's some of the best vapes that I have. Why? Because I built a single coil, I did it spaced once, and it was shit. It wasn't heating up, nothing, so I said, fuck this, I'm going to go back to doing the way that I build coils. Yes, it's nickel, yes, it's a little bit trickier, but this shouldn't be rocket science. So I built a single coil, and then I built a dual coil setup, and man, they just work. I mean, the vapor production, which is what I was... that's what I was missing. To me, the vapor production was what I was missing with the first coils that I built when I built them, as they were, they were suggesting, which was space and stuff like that. And it's obviously, this is going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm using Japanese cotton, and the way, I have my device and I run it at 40 watts pretty much all the time on the Derringer, on an atty that's got a lot of airflow. So I need those coils in there to produce what I want. But that's just something that people need to remember. Yes, this is a suggested build that a lot of people are having great success with, but always mess around with it and try to do it yourself in a different fashion. Don't just say, okay, I got a DNA 40, I want to build some coils, what do I do? Okay, well, the standard is create coils that are separated this much in between each coil, and you're gonna have a great vape. Not necessarily.
Not
and I
necessarily,
think
but
that's
I have found
I mean,
that space ones do work better for me. I've tried both as well on different devices, but the space one out, it just seems like it works really well for me. And from my point of view, I mean, and not to jump in a little bit, but we're talking about pros and cons and things you like. I think it does take a little bit of practice, but I mean, I've had with the Derringer, I'm running dual coils in here at 30 with 30 gauge, 33.3 watts and 470 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's thick and warm and really good.
So I think this is. I'll throw this out there. This is, and I try and be around the DNA TP user group on Facebook as much as I can. And I think the people that get jumped on are the people that come in and they either don't provide any information. They say this sucks, or I can't get this to work, and that's the extent of their post. Those people at this point in time, and I'm not going to try and comment on historically, like recent days, weeks, what have you. Those are the people that usually kind of get flamed a little bit because it's not helpful, right? And they're not given anything anybody can help them with.
Yeah.
When I tell people, especially starting out, wrap your coil in whatever atomizer you have, check the resistance, make sure that you're in that 0.1 to 0.4 operating range. You can go a little lower, you can go a little higher. You're going to miss out on some of the maybe top-end wattages. But once you have your coil set up, put it on the device, turn off temperature control, drop the wattage way down, and just gently fire it to make sure that you don't have any, shorts, real big hot spots, crossed over wires. Then, once you're satisfied with the way the coil, and I'm not saying that you got to turn it into a flashlight and just, rock tons of power through it, just enough so that you can tell that there's no definite shorts. Then, wick it, fill it, and you turn temperature back on, and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. And that's what I started doing during the beta, and it's to the point where, for
Question for you.
using nickel is super easy now. Yeah.
Got a question for you. Okay. There's been a lot of controversy. Maybe that's the wrong word, but there's been a lot of talk about, nickel wire safety.
Yeah. Once you said question, I knew this is where you were going.
Well, I was going to bring it up too, but I don't really even have to moderate this show.
So, so my understanding is once you get nickel above 600 degrees, it starts to degrade and chemical composition changes and all this other stuff. Maybe you can elaborate on that for us.
Well, let me jump in real quick and just say kind of what I was going to say on that question before Basil answers. I think one of the problems with Evolve not coming out with any set standard of rules and how-tos is that there has been information that's contradicted with other I could talk to one guy and he'll say, drive her in that coil, and then I'll talk to another guy and he'll say, don't drive her in that coil. And so that's added some confusion to the mix for the people that are trying to learn and stuff. Go ahead, Basil, say what you were going to say.
Yeah, I mean, part of that just plays into the fact that it's a free, unregulated market, right? You go back long enough ago, and emissions from a car didn't matter, and the manufacturer didn't have to care. I think Evolve does have some responsibility to try and provide something. Now, that being said, I'm certainly not a chemist. I'm not a metallurgist. I don't know what happens with nickel at certain points. I know it works for me, and I've got to still imagine that if my light firing before I wick something up, just to make sure that there's no shorts in my build, I can't imagine it's degrading it, just based on the performance of the wire once it's done. I can't comment on whether there's a health issue or not, and I wouldn't, just because it would be irresponsible for me to say, no, there's no issue, or yes, there is an issue. But I think you've got that. I mean, we should all have that same concern with Kanthal, too, right? Sure. I mean, there's going to be a point where Kanthal degrades. I don't know.
Kanthal, nichrome, and that's kind of the thing that, I had a little DNA 40 rant a while ago, and one thing that I mentioned was that people are going a little easy on Evolve, like when G-Plat comes out and they have some weird stuff going on with their wire, everybody holds their feet to the fire. Or when some Chinese company comes out and they have, the first run of their mods all freak out and do weird shit, everyone holds their feet to the fire. Some of the people
excuse me.
Yeah, some of the people that normally would hold, maybe some of the reviewers even, that normally would hold other modders' feet to the fire, they're not doing it to Evolve, and that's bothered me a little bit.
I think Evolve is a lot like the Apple of vaping.
Yeah, definitely.
Apple gets away with a lot of things. I mean, how many people should have been insulted by being told they were holding their iPhone 4 the wrong way? I mean, I get it. I think Evolve probably being an American-based company, and the bulk of our target audiences is probably in America, right? And there's, I think, a little bit of prestige that rightly or wrongly comes with being an American-based technology company. I think they get away with some things, but I also think that by and large, the products that they've put out over the years have been pretty reliable, and they've pushed the envelope, and maybe that does buy them a little bit of leeway in the market.
Sure, and I get that, and I'm one of their biggest fans. Even though I've had problems with this, I still love Evolve. But we kind of jumped off subject. Angsty, did you want to talk a little bit more about pros and cons from a user standpoint?
User side, sure. I mean, the most obvious one is with the temperature limiting thing. If you set it at around 450, you can't burn your cotton anymore, which is, from a user's perspective, really awesome. I mean, that means as long as you're running some sort of clean juice, you can use your wick for a lot longer, and it's not going to be burnt and nasty when you pull it out. I think that's solid. That's one of the reasons I was really excited to get a hold of one. I pushed for one for a long time, and I was excited to get it because that technology, I think, where I might argue is not quite there yet. The idea behind it, I'm fully behind it, because as all of us as educated vapors know, there's not any safe wick out there, 100% weight, right? Every single wick out there, including organic cotton, which I prefer, has got things that can go wrong with it as soon as it combusts, or it gets too hot, in other ways, or if it gets cut wrong, like is the case with some of the ceramics and that kind of thing, right? So that to me is awesome. I mean, it's a great idea. I want to push forward. I'm waiting for the science to come back from Farsalinos to see whether or not we have to make it lower than 450 or whatever, right? I want to see that.
So to dovetail there, I think it's interesting that you talk about Dr. Farsalinos in that study. I think any of us that are firmly entrenched as enthusiasts are really anxious to see what he comes up with. And if anybody's catching this, replay or otherwise, that doesn't know about Dr. Farsalinos, do yourself a quick favor and just Google his name and check out some of his research, because it's kind of bleeding edge, right, of what we should be concerned about. The char point of cotton, to get back to that, is technically 410. But I agree with you that at 450, if there's any amount of liquid in there, you're really not going to cause any visible structural damage to the cotton.
Right.
The same thing with stainless steel mesh. So every 10 months or so, people come back and say that oxidizing stainless steel mesh is dangerous. Since Genesis atomizers have been on the market, that's kind of been the every 10 months, right? That you oxidize stainless steel to a certain temperature. It's somewhere around 1,000 degrees, I think, that it releases some negative. It's chromium -6 ions or chromium 6 ions. I forget which exactly. That supposedly are incredibly toxic. And the guys that do serious metallurgy and welding with stainless steel wear, like high-end respirators. Yeah. With the DNA 40 chip and nickel wire, you can craft a build pretty easily that would require you not to have to oxidize your mesh. So Brandon from Evolve would be the first to tell you that the chipset and nickel is not really designed, and they didn't have mesh in mind with this, so they don't necessarily say you should or shouldn't use it. They say if it works for you, great, but we didn't really design it for that. Now, that being said, there's certain atomizers I think you need to oxidize it for. I have an Inax MK2 and an MK2R, and I oxidize the mesh there. SAC22, I don't oxidize the mesh before I put it in if I'm going to build it with nickel. So it just kind of depends on preference and the atomizer you use, but it's another, I don't know, maybe a selling point. I hate to say selling point. I'm not trying to sell anything, but I think it's maybe a pro. But it could be a con if you believe oxidizing is the only way to go.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's true. One of the things that stands out to me for a con, besides the chip things, which we can talk about later, but the thing that gets me is I'm a vaping enthusiast, right? I've got what some people would consider a reasonable sized collection of mods over here. Everything from Raptors to OKRs, DNA 30s, and 40s now, and I've also got a reasonable selection of atomizers. One of the things that gets me about the 40 going with a nickel route, and I understand the technical reasons of why they did it, but the thing that gets me is once you build one of your atomizers for it, it's kind of locked into the 40s, right? I've got far fewer atomizers than I have mods, and once I build for a 40, it's kind of stuck on the 40s, and it kind of limits you that way. And I think for a majority of vapors out there, that's even more of a con than it is for me personally. Just that it's locked into the thing now. Now that said, I find it good now that I've had some practice to deal with it. I don't necessarily like it in a tank. I've tried it a couple of different times with different tanks, and it's not as satisfying. But doing it up in a dripper, with the temperature cranked up a little bit, is great. I mean, it's actually quite pleasant. It's not as warm as building on a real low build on a mech, but it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, I guess I'm a guy who always fancied himself to like a really hot vape, but I've always liked regulated power. For me, I get everything out of it that I've ever wanted. It's funny, Robert earlier said that he didn't like the preheat, but that is one of the things that I like the most about it. So I'm probably one of about 6 people that ever owned a Janty Mid, and I understand that. For those of you that missed the Mid or haven't heard of it, it was a mod that lets you play with the pulse width curve yourself. You could go in through software, build your own power delivery curves, and then upload it back to the device. Cutting edge, never really panned out, primarily because it had a terrible, terrible, terrible form factor.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things, especially with Genesis vaping, in some of the older Genesis where you really had to get the tilt to get it to wick worth a damn, was that it took forever to ramp up and get to that heat point. I like it. I like to get to that heat point right away, get me to start off with that satisfying vape, and I don't notice that the temperature dials back. Even more so with the DNA 40, because it really is all about trying to hover at that temperature set point but not exceed it. So for me, it's everything that I've really ever wanted in a vape. That's exactly what I like. I can see where some people
I'd
don't
like to see him at least. Okay, I consider that like part of a feature set. So why not allow us to control it to some degree? Turn it on, turn it off, or be able to set it. It's software. So it's like...
Yeah, that's a fair question. I don't have an answer. As it happens, I love the way it's implemented.
I understand the concept, but when I'm vaping, it's really noticeable on the RDNA. It really is. That thing just whoosh, right, and then it comes right back down. It's just...
Yeah, I can see where... And part of it, I think, is maybe that we're just so used to, most builds... Regardless, right? Most mods don't have any sort of... Most mods don't have a feature set that does that, right? Maybe there's a couple newer ones from China that go the other way, where they start low and then get high. Yeah.
I mean, I just picked this up. It has a soft, standard, and powerful mode. So you either have it ramp up, or you have your normal when you hit a normal regulated mod where it's no curve, it's just steady, or you have a powerful mode where it hits hard and comes back down. At least you have the options to select in between those three.
I wonder if that has something to do with on the DNA, if it has something to do with the way that it's detecting the resistance change. I wonder if the preheat is something that has to be built in, so that way
maybe
it sees a change and then brings it down, so where the coil could be at, but now you're going to bring it down to where it's at and where it's been. So
that's a really good point, because that is a big part of it. And if you have builds that they aren't built in such a way where they're firing evenly, or you have a loose connection either at the 510 itself or in your post screws, you'll see that a build may start to fire and this happens to me every once in a while where I've got something that's just a little loose. It will start to fire in temperature mode, and then it will flip to voltage, and then I'll let off, and I'll go to fire it again, and it'll flip back to temp. And a lot of times that's a loose connection, so that could be part of the reason that the preheat is implemented in that way.
Something just occurred to me. Now, if anybody's been watching me in the little square, right, when I haven't been verbalizing, you got to know I'm a chain vapor, right? Yeah, I'm a chain vapor.
You're allowed chain vapor as well.
Somebody commented about that.
They did. They said that.
They said, man, that guy chains.
All right, I'll go to quiet mode, but I'm wondering if because I am such a chain vapor, that the DNA 40 just has an issue with me.
We're keeping up
Nope.
with you, maybe.
I doubt it. I don't think so because I chain vape when we're on the show on mine, and my biggest issue is white cotton. Like I'll take the top off and I'm like, damn, how long have I been vaping on cotton that ain't got no juice on it?
Bacon cotton.
You know, because that's the first thing that I had to get used to. It was okay. There's no more juice left on there, and I'm barely getting any whiffs. But I don't think so, Robert. I think now I will say this. One thing that does happen when you're chain vaping is your atty's going to get fucking hot.
Quite
Yes.
hot.
It gets
Yes.
hot, and that's something
Yes.
that I try to explain to people too. Is that okay? You're limiting that temperature at 4 whatever it is that you have it set to. Okay, I think I have mine set to default, which is 460, or maybe I have it a little higher. But that atomizer is going to get hot, and I think you don't notice it as much as when you're using Kanthal or using a separate device or build, because that Kanthal is heat right away, boom, and then you let off, and then heat right away, and then boom, you let off. So this is more gradual, and I think the being it gradual like that starts heat soaking the atty, you know. So
Yep.
that might be an issue too. So not so much with you or chain vaping, but you know, the size of the atomizer that you're using, how much. Do you have it on a device that's got maybe a plastic top or something that doesn't sink heat into it? So I'm sure a lot of that has to do with fluctuations. If it's taking a temperature reading on the board and it's taking a resistance reading that is affected by heat, you know, a lot of that could.
And I do. I think that's absolutely true, because this little guy, which I absolutely adore, is a Veritube 510. So and my Derringer sits right on the Veritube, which is sitting right on the mod, and the whole box gets hot. And I do see it acting a little wonky after a little while. So I'll set it down and pick another mod for a little while.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it's
I
a
mean,
nice problem to have.
there are obviously some, you know, addies that wick faster than others. I mean, I've noticed that you know, the ramp up thing more with tanks, and then, you know, just because it's just not wicking fast enough. Like with the K-Fun Light Plus, they seem to have that issue a lot with the nickel builds. Sorry, Basil, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you gonna say?
No. I was gonna say it's a good problem to have to be able to pick up several mods.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it.
I'm sitting here with 5 DNA 40 mods in front of me, and that, I mean, it is really all. Since the beta, I got rid of just about everything else. I own one functional mech that I use incredibly sparingly, and I recently acquired a ZNA, and I'm really tempted to put a 40 board in it, but I don't think it's going to get great battery life with an 18490. But otherwise, I mean, I firmly believe in it. It suits my vaping preference. I'll say that. It may not be everything for everyone. For me, it is exactly what I like in vaping. I want that immediate warm vape, and I get that, and I get it for days, regardless of my setup. So maybe I've just mastered it, and I'm some sort of coil whisperer. I doubt that.
You know,
but it just works for me.
Master.
It's funny that you mentioned Zen, because a few of our friends talked to him at VaporCon last year, and one of the first things they said is, "Hello, where are the DNA 40 Zenesis devices?" You know, and him and Zen being Zen said, "I'm not going to touch a board that has issues or will have issues," and this is before they had even come out. And sure enough, you know, he was right. The boards had issues in the beginning, which, you know, did it save him some hassle with having to return to mods and stuff like that. You know, as a mod maker, I feel for Vapor Flask and you know, Vapor Shark and all those guys who are having to, knowing people who work at each of those facilities and are having to, you know, are doing all the returns and stuff like that, because, you know, even if it's a 6, 7, 8%, whatever it was, the return rate, it still has to be hurting the business somehow, because now you have a person who is out of mod, who is now waiting on something. Maybe, you know, Vapor Shark had one of the worst. It was like 30 days, 35, 40 days on the turnaround on some of these devices.
Well, let's jump. Hey, Mast, let's just because I was just about to ask you that. Okay. For those that don't know that are watching, why don't you explain that? Because I mean, what the problems were with the first couple of runs of boards and what they were doing. Because some people might have no clue what you're talking about.
Right. So to my knowledge, some of the original boards, and this was in the literature that Evolve sent out, had some issues with uncovered vias or vias that you want to talk, if you want to say, under the screen ribbon. They were picked up on, and I believe, based if I'm correct, those were only beta ones, right? So some were released
That
and they were able to
was
fix it.
so there were during the beta there were effectively almost zero problems. The first kind of hint of a screen issue was after the beta had been running, and I wasn't involved in the very early stage. I got in about midway through, so I'd probably had my HANA beta for 3 or 4 weeks, and around that point they went to the first production run, and it was at around the same time, maybe a couple of days after, that somebody moved a board or had gotten a board that they hadn't done something with and kind of discovered it. So um, they thought that it was the vias or the some of the connections weren't coded right where the ribbon kind of loops over the edge of the board. And I think that was a problem. Ultimately, the problems really came down to being with some of the hardware components, and it took them a bit of time to get that sorted out.
Yeah, and because at first I believe there was an issue with the actual PCB that Evolve was receiving from the PCB manufacturer. The actual, you could call it the bread and butter of this whole thing. Here's the PCB, and Evolve is actually putting all the components on it.
Yeah, when you
There
look
was an
at a
issue.
microchip, right, or what most
Right.
people consider a microchip or a board, it's the green, hard, shiny, foamy stuff in the middle. That's the
Correct.
PCB.
Correct, and then that PCB has multiple layers. Like just like a desktop computer, the motherboard has multiple layers, and the vias that we're talking about are pretty much the lanes that are carrying the information on the board in between the different levels into the different components. So what he's talking about on the edge is some of those lanes that might have not been covered by the epoxy or whatever it is that actually coats the board, and that can cause issues. Then there was, as I understand it, there were some the issues with the PCB itself had to do with the way that the chip communicated with the screen, and it was having issues communicating because the screen was supposed to be displaying certain things at certain times, and that's when you got the you can call it the brick screen or the matrix screen or the screen that has all the jibber jabber on it, and that was another issue that was happening that was that they tried to fix, I believe, with software by doing a flash update. So you could send your chips back. There could be a flash update done, and that basically you'd say that seemed to help some of the problem, right? You would say.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to overcome, software, a hardware problem with
Right,
software,
with
and there's
software,
only so
right?
far that'll get you. I mean, I
Yeah,
know a lot more, and this is kind of the point where I have to be very careful what I say. So as part
yep,
of the beta, like, there's an ongoing discussion, and there's an NDA that was signed, so there's not much I can say. Like, it sounds like a cop-out, but it's like a
yeah.
legit legal document,
Yeah, so
so, like,
I wasn't in the beta, and I'm not in DA, and so, but that is, as far as I know, is they were having an issue with the components on the board. They tried to fix it with the flash fix, and that kind of helped, didn't help. The biggest issues were that some of these, and this is something that was hard for me to understand because I got some of the first run boards, and I mean, I was like, I'm running these things. I haven't had one bit of problem. I've built 4 mods with them. They haven't acted up. So what is it? I mean, did I get lucky? And what would happen is you started having more and more people report the issue, okay? And then they started seeing these people that are saying, man, well, I've had one of the original boards and I don't have any issues, and I was one of them.
yeah.
And I have built some mods that I am not going to take the board out of because you know how much of a pain in the ass it was to put the board in here. The board's not
Hmm.
coming out, whether it has an issue or not. So, and it was funny because Angsty had just gotten one of the mods that I had built, and I'm like, man, mine's been fine. And he sends a picture of one of his that a modder had fixed for him and sent back, and he goes, man, I just got it back, and here it is, and it's already acting up. I'm like, ah, sucks to be you. Well, 5 minutes later, this thing does it, and I'm like, son of a bitch.
And then like 3 days later, this one did it.
Right. So, but for me, I was like, you know what? It's glitching, but I can still vape, so I don't care. Okay.
Well, yeah. And Mass, do you think maybe Evolve downplayed the issue a little bit? I think they said 5-10% had that problem.
Right. So I don't think.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say because the first 2 boards that I had the issue, and my second board I didn't even bother to take it back, and I think there's a lot of other people like that just live with it because it doesn't always happen, and it'll fix itself.
Okay, so I would say I have a skewed opinion on this because I did not spend $200 and something on a DNA mod. I don't have 2 or 3 DNA mods that I have purchased because I've built my own. Okay, so it's a little bit different when a device that you've built is acting up or something like that versus, holy crap, I just saved for 3 months to buy this device and now it's acting up. This is bullshit. Okay, so but to get into that, I think that the Evolve's not going to come out and say, look, we have screwed up this bad and this is what's going on. I mean, that would be I don't think that would be beneficial for them. I think that they did come out and say, because that was the number one question people were asking Brandon every time he was on somebody's show. And it would, they would say, well, what's the percentage? What's the percentage? And so at first it was, 4 or 5%, and then 6%. And you have to remember too, Evolve is moving some serious amount of boards out there. I mean, you talk to Vapor Shark, and they have a team of like 5 people that all they do is just get the returns, fix them, send them back out. Get the returns, fix them, send them back out. And from the very first show that I had a DNA board and a device, I said, kudos to Evolve for taking the responsibility to actually fix this and deal with these issues, because a lot of companies don't do that. A lot of companies say, well, you've had the device, take it up with the manufacturer, which would be Vapor Shark or it would be Vapor Flask, and then now Vapor Flask and them have to deal with them. Well, obviously it doesn't make any business sense to be Vapor Flask or Vapor Shark or anybody else and take those mods that are coming in and then send them to Evolve for Evolve to do the replacement. Or me have a mod that I've made for someone and say, send it to Evolve for a replacement. Obviously, I would have the person send it to me. But I don't think they downplayed the issue. I think that people saw a percentage, which they said 4, 5, 6, whatever percent it was, and they thought that's too low. Well, 6% of thousands of boards is a lot.
I think in some ways too, it's squeaky wheel, right? So, the good that you do in any industry is often outweighed and outshined by the couple of bad experiences somebody has, and that's just the cost of doing business in some ways. I think what people, and the other thing that I think people really discount is, one, the volume that Evolve moves. Some of these manufacturers are buying thousands of boards at a time, right? I mean, like true wholesale. But they forget that we're in a very cottage industry. It's not like Honda. It's not like we're talking about cars, where every manufacturer's throwing out thousands of cars and people buy them, and there's consumer reports and all this serious data, and that there's expected recalls and things. Like, we're in a much smaller industry, and there's not a lot of industries that we touch on a daily basis where you are, a phone call away, and a lot of times, from the guy who owns a company. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't call and get his second in command very easily, right? I had a big brouhaha with Home Depot over a window job they did, and it was hell, right? But I had a problem with my flask. I sent Charlie a message on Facebook. I have his cell phone number, right? Like, what other industry is, can you do that? So I think some people expected a more formal statement from Evolve, and I don't know that they did or did not owe the community at large a bigger explanation, but I think people really looked for it. I think maybe in retrospect, had they come out and said, hey, listen, here's the deal. We know that there is approximately X percentage of boards that may or may not have an issue. We're going to stand behind it and take care of them. I think it would have gone a long way to curbing some of the really negative emotions and feelings that maybe were left out there.
Yeah, I definitely think that in general, people with problems are always going to be louder than the people that are happy with
Always.
the product.
Always.
We did hear some horror stories where oh, this mod, like one was I think a modder in UK bought 50 chips and 48 were bad. But how much of that do you guys think was possibly modder's error and
That is a good point. That is a good point, and it seems like the people who have had significant numbers of problems have been, or people with problems in general, have been the people who, certain people. I'm not going to name names. It's not important, but it seems to be much closer to specific manufacturers, and maybe that's the volume. Could be part of the batch runs that they received, but it's possible that there's a build element to that as well.
Well, and another issue too is if let's say this board is affected by temperature, okay, by ambient temperature. I've shown how to put together a DNA 30 on the Plumes show and stuff like that, and I always stressed. And especially when soldering, caution, because these are very small components and they can soak up a lot of heat like that when you're soldering them together. Now, I know a lot of modders and some manufacturers out there will have either a jig that the board will press into to the contact so they don't have to solder certain points, or are using some kind of daughter board or anything like that. But if the board is very sensitive to temperature and you go in and you're using your same method of soldering to the board, this isn't a cop-out, this isn't anything that's going on, this is just me speculating here. There's a possibility that you could be having issues with the boards if too much, your what I call your solder time on the board is too long. You're holding that soldering iron on there for too long and could be causing issues. Now, again, that could be that could be a bunch of other things, but that there's always a possibility of that happening. Now, yes, the thing with overseas and people buying boards over there, here's the thing: they had issue with boards. They have to get shipped from here in the U.S. overseas, so that's going to happen. If you have, yeah.
It's no different than a custom PC builder in the UK having a problem with the Asus motherboard they bought. I mean, because of their proximity, right? If the retailer won't honor that and replace it for them, they're going to have to deal with the manufacturer. That's just kind of electronics in general, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point, though, Masty, that talking about the boards, I mean, here's a DNA 40 board I haven't done anything with, right? And obviously nobody at home is going to be able to see this, but, in looking at this, I mean, the circuitry on here and on any board of the modern era in general, it's impressive. There's tiny, tiny components, and some of these vias that run through the board, I mean, you're talking about, cabling and wiring that's the size of a human hair.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much with a loose soldering iron. The more manual that process is, the more prone you may be to board.
Yeah, and again, I don't want other modders taking this as, oh, well, now they're saying that it's the modder's fault by soldering and taking
that's why I'm
long.
I was very careful to use the word may.
Not and that's something. But if it's something that helps, something that maybe, hey, next time the next one that you build, keep an eye on, how long you're spending at each connection. Try to do it as fast as possible. And if you don't, because that's something that I really we're getting away from it, but I really want people to remember this and get back to it. The modder will never know if he or she is doing anything wrong if you don't give it any feedback, right? Evolve won't know that they're doing something wrong unless people give them feedback. So if you are building something and you find something that's kind of weird or interesting, always reach out. If you receive a mod from a mod maker and something just isn't right, don't say, whatever. It's not a big deal. It's just the box or the button acting up or something. It's just it's just how it is, because there might be actually something that you could help that person with before they run a batch of 300 or something. And I think some people are just going away from that by saying, well, it's just how it is. But I think that with the new DNA boards, the attention that you have to pay to your 510s, the attention that you have to pay to your connections and your batteries and your battery sleds when you're building stuff as a modder has to be a little bit more, because it's not as forgiving. Now that isn't anything towards the board, but maybe for the board to basically run as efficiently as possible, you have to feed it efficient power without any resistance issues. And a lot of people will say, well, that's BS. Why are we getting into something like this? Well, if that's the technology that we're getting into and more advanced, maybe the building methods have to get more advanced too. So
I definitely want to give the modders and Evolve major props, even though we've criticized them here. I mean, when I had issues with my BAP, it was expressed back to me. Like, I sent it to them like on a Monday, got it back on a Friday. So they've definitely stayed on top of it, and so I want to give them props for that. Sorry, Robert, were you going to say something?
I'll tag team on what you just said. Yeah, you can't find fault in the way these problems have been handled by the mod makers and Evolve. Yeah. Stellar all the way around. Okay, so kudos goes out to them. Everybody stepped up. But okay, what I was starting to come out with is like, shouldn't we start looking towards technology that is like, I hate to use the term bulletproof, but I mean, right now, at least I think the place where this belongs is for the average vapor that's looking for somewhat more. They can now get some products out there that are temperature sensing coils. Put it on either any of your DNA 40s and have a reasonably good experience for those average vapors. Okay, I just want to see the technology become virtually bulletproof, and I guess it's certainly not bulletproof when I build a coil, because it's like I don't know.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up, though, because you had mentioned earlier that you and I think Matt, have the Kanger nickel heads, and Matt made a comment about the Aspire nickel heads and not liking them.
The Nautilus ones. I haven't tried the Atlantis ones yet.
Yeah, I have the Nautilus ones, and at least the Ferks box that I got, I picked up one that somebody was basically giving away. And I'm hoping it's from maybe a separate batch or something. I didn't like the Nautilus ones. And no. I thought they wicked horribly.
Here's one right here. It's like I'll put it right on here, and it's like, this is not a satisfying. It works.
No.
It doesn't work well.
Yeah, I didn't get a great experience from the Nautilus nickel coils because I didn't get the warmth, and I didn't get tons of flavor. For me, in my vaping preference, though, I would never pick up and vape a Nautilus. I would vape just about any other rebuildable or anything else before I would pick up. I would rather have a Cisco Spec 510 and a regulated mod than a Nautilus, I think.
Well,
what
that tells me, though, is that maybe nickel wire is just better in some applications than others. I mean, the Nautilus has tighter, because the normal Nautilus BVC heads are great. They wick great. But it's got, less airflow, and maybe there's something with that wicking. I don't know, because it's not all cotton. But then, yeah, you got something like the sub-tank and these heads, and it performs just as good as the normal heads do. I haven't noticed a drop in performance at all. So it's kind of interesting, because they're definitely way different types of tanks, more airflow, bigger coil, and so. I don't know.
And that's why I haven't really liked it in the K button. But I'm finding it very nice in a dripper, and I think it is airflow. I think it's power, both of which the K button can't stand up to like a dripper can.
And wick saturation. I mean,
if
the wick isn't saturated, you're going to have an issue.
Yeah, I get a great vape with nickel and a K-Fun. Most of my vaping as of late has been on mesh. I'm just on a real big mesh run. But the question that I would have for you guys that have the Kanger heads for the sub-tank or mini sub-tank, do you get a warm vape from them with the nickel?
I do.
Yeah?
Semi.
I mean, I have it pumped up to 470 degrees and 30 watts. Some people might say that's too high.
I'm running mine at default. I was vaping at 20 watts, now at like 25. And as you bump it up, it does get warmer.
Mm. Yeah, because that is the biggest downfall for me. I got decent flavor, and I got plenty of vapor with the Aspire, but I just never got the warmth because it couldn't for me, it simply couldn't handle the kind of heat that I wanted it to put out.
And I think to Candy's point, because Candy's talking about the flavor of nickel wire, and it seems to be very polarizing that I've seen. Some people really taste it very strongly, and some people say they can't taste it at all. I'm the guy that with a K-Fun, that's one of the reasons I don't like it in the K-Fun, because I can taste it a lot more there. I get the drip stronger flavors, like the lab rat stuff, Carmick Vapors, the stuff that's got, it's got a lot of flavor involved, and that stuff, I think it either covers it up, or with that kind of power and that kind of saturation, I don't notice it as much, or what, I'm not sure.
I wonder how much of that, though, is it actually starting to char the cotton maybe a little bit in the K-Funs, because I've noted, mine just, I haven't gotten the build down yet, it's not wicking efficiently, and I do get a weird taste from it. Do any of you other guys get a weird taste from it?
I've never, but again, I'm of the school where I lightly fire everything before I do it, so if there is some sort of residue on it, perhaps I'm mitigating it by doing that up front. Do you guys do something similar or no?
Yeah, I pulse it before I wake it up.
I torch mine. So, and I mean, people are like, "Oh my God, you're torching nickel!" I'm like, "What the?" Yeah, I torch it, and I've never had a taste that I could say. So I don't know.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever tasted anything from the nickel either.
And I think that's just, there's super tasters out there, and there's people that are, because everybody's got different amount of taste buds, and they taste things differently. Just like, juice is totally subjective too, right? My favorite ADV that I've vaped bajillions of liters of, some people hate. Some people that I respect quite highly and having a good palate for other juice, they hate my juice.
Yeah.
That's just flavor. It's just, I think people taste things differently.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just gonna say, Matt, I didn't know if you did you have anything written down for something that I picked up on watching Phil's video being overseas in the Anoken factory, was that Anoken was actually working on doing a temperature control patent. So I was wondering if anyone had seen that or talked about that or any of that stuff.
Yeah,
so.
I was also going to ask you guys about the new SX Mini that's supposed to be coming out. That's supposedly temp control. Let's get into that. Talk about other devices, possibly other ways it could be implemented. I know there's something that what the IMEO is working on or has done.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. So IMEO's VIR, which he has been talking about for a legit 2+ years, because when I was in the GG game before I bought my house 2 years ago, I had a TS, I had a UFS, I had an ODV1, an ODV2. At one point, I had an atty. Like, I had the whole run for a while there. He's been talking about the VIR. The VIR is going to run, on titanium wire, is what you're going to use. You can use titanium wire with a DNA 40. You have to cut your temperatures in half because the power curve for it is much different. The fear that I think a lot of people have or should have, right, every bit as much as maybe they're worried about nickel at certain temperatures, is titanium degrading into titanium oxide, which is pretty nasty stuff. And I think that is going to be pretty prevalent with that. Some of the picture, I saw a picture somewhere where somebody had shown a coil after some use with titanium wire, and it was white and crusty. It looked pretty foul. So I don't know. The Yeehee specs that I saw, at one point they put out an image that showed their calculation formula, and it looked to be a bunch of gibberish that really didn't have anything to do with temperature. It just looked like a different way to measure wattage.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is the joules.
Yeah.
And they Yeehee put out an image of their SX Mini. We talked about this on the show on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeehee said this is not going to be in the current SX Minis. You're not going to be able to upgrade it. And I was trying to explain to people, because we're catching a lot of flack about it, is, look, this is going to be a complete different board. That's like saying, hey, here's a device that has a DNA 30 in it, and you expect it to do temperature control by just doing an update. It's not going to happen. It has different components on the board, all that. Well, it's kind of interesting, because I expressed to Yeehee that, oh, great, this is just another empty promise. You guys are talking about temperature control and all this other stuff, but, you can show pictures of a board all you want. I want to see a device in action. Well, I got shut the hell up, because there is a device today that I saw was the Mini with the, I'll zoom in on it, with the temperature actually running. It's at 244 degrees Fahrenheit,
Wow.
and it's measuring in joules. And it was actually at a trade show that they're at right now, and it's got a coil firing. So I got shut up. So there it is. There's an actual, no one's actually seen this picture. He actually just sent it, and it's an actual working model. Because I said I'm tired of, telling people about a product that you might be coming out with, and you always change your mind or change specs or something like that. But there it is. That's an actual SX Mini with temperature control built in, working. Now, what wire it's using? I assume it's using nickel. What its range is going to be. I mean, you could see something on a spec sheet. That's fine. But to actually see one is very interesting. Out in the wild. So.
That guy has a
and
huge thumb. Maybe it's just an angle.
He does have a big thumb. That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's when it's really going to get interesting, is when there starts to be more competition for Evolve with this, and
Yeah.
it's going to be, the next year is going to be really interesting.
Did
Is there
anybody
any
see
more,
what wire that ran with?
I believe it was nickel. So,
Okay.
and here's this is just me speculating, but why wouldn't they do it with nickel to begin with? Okay, and the reason I say that is if you have Ganger tanks, if you have Aspire tanks, if you have all these tanks coming in with nickel heads in them,
Right.
and you're going to put out a device, why would you now have something else? Now, this is just a rumor, and I'll say this, put a little icon as a rumor, but I was told that it's been running with Canthal also. Okay.
That's
Now,
something. Temperature?
Wait a minute, in
Okay.
temperature mode?
yeah, in temperature mode. I have not seen a picture of it or a video of it, so this is why it's a rumor, and it hasn't been proven or anything like that. But it has ran with Canthal. Now, first thing I asked was, okay, well, where's the proof? And obviously they're not ready to release that. And I said, can it actually control the temperature? Because there's a difference of the device telling you what temperature the device, the coil's at, and then it's another thing to be able to control that, right? And be able to do that. Now, one of the things that I was wondering about too, and this is a thought that I had way before the DNA 40 had come out, just when there was talks about temperature control or temperature protection, should I say, was, has someone actually done research like Evolve has done, obviously, figuring out what are our Canthal builds getting to? Okay, are we really at 1,000, at 500? Are we at 400? So on a regular, take a side-by-side build, okay, that you're going to put on a DNA 40. If you're running it with Canthal and you have it in the same atomizer, the same setup, has someone actually done the research to see what that, and I'm sure Farsalinos is in the middle of doing this, but
Yeah.
what are these coils getting to? Because if we're hovering around 500, 600, where your DNA 40 is at 460, that's a jump, but if we're at, if we're talking about 700 degrees or something like that, that is really a big difference.
But
So
right
I
now
was
we're all
wondering
just
about that.
speculating. We're all just speculating. We really
Correct.
need the study to come out.
Yeah, the bits and pieces that I know about what Evolve has done is that I think the concerns are really there when you start to approach a dry coil state.
Yeah.
That's when you're at the biggest risk. Now, I think you start pushing some of these incredible wattages and these, really, sub-ohm, you start getting 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. You see some of these cloud bros blowing, coils at 0.0, whatever. Those are the times where I think you are more likely to even have a saturated coil that could be exceeding a danger threshold.
Yeah.
Not to mention, once they finally do get a semi-dry hit, I mean, shit.
You might as well die.
There's a reason they don't use
Formaldehyde's
match.
shitty.
So-
Mast, you were going to say something about Inikin, and I cut you off a little bit. Was there any more to that? Because I didn't watch Phil say
No,
that.
that's something that I was interested in finding out more about, because obviously Evolve and Inikin have had a past working together and doing stuff like that. And I'm interested to see what their patent on temperature protection or control is really going after.
Well, yeah, it's going to be
Um,
interesting if they start competing with each other.
Yeah, as their
yeah.
partners. I mean,
Oh my God! You mean
Right.
America's going to clone their technology?
Yeah, and I was really looking to see CGG step up and actually produce in mass something that was different because at a certain point as a modder I just step back and say let's look at the technology. I don't care who's behind it, whether it's Evolve or GG or Hehe or Anakin. Evolving this and moving it into the direction that we're going is good because
hmm
if the response from Farsalinos is definitely temperature protection has to be there, you guys really want to stay below, boom, this number. Well, we already kind of have devices that can do that. Instead of saying, man, we need to be below 460. Let's find a company that can build a device that can do this.
Well, and
You
that's, I
know,
mean, that's some of the driving factor behind the technology and Evolve's timing.
yeah,
Um, they knew that the FDA was going to make a move, and they wanted, I think ultimately they wanted to be in a position where they wanted to have the technology out on the market so that we could look, we could say as a vaping community, say, look, here it is, here's the answer, we have it, we're already making it, it's already out there. And I really think they wanted to try and be in that position. Now, it's unfortunate they had some of the hardware problems they had, but by and large, I mean those should be remedied. And I haven't heard. There are a couple of things here and there, but I think I really haven't heard much noise about outside of the Vapor Shark stuff, which almost seems to be isolated to the way that they've built and designed their mod. I could be wrong. Could be wrong.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I think the technology in and of itself, I think, is pretty impressive. And whether you want to call it Rev 1 and say that it's got a long ways to go, or you want to say it can stand as it is on its own merit, I think it's an impressive effort.
Yeah, and,
On
and
a
I'll say
side
this
note,
about the.
on a side note, does anybody see this Imeo thing just turning into a fucking train wreck? I mean, can you imagine when people start having problems with his product and bitching to him and him just telling everybody to fuck off and they're doing it wrong?
The biggest problem that Imeo is going to have, whether or not the technology works, is that there is no visible feedback other than, I think, what does he have, like a colored LED indicator? And I think that is going to make it really hard for people to get behind and understand how it works and what's happening without any sort of visual feedback
Yeah.
to the device.
Yeah.
True.
I was just going to say real quick about the boards. I think that it's safe to say, when you are getting a replacement board for your DNA, if it's acted up and you're a modder or something like that, or you're buying boards, I believe that the boards with, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Basil, the boards with the gold contacts on the boards are the latest and greatest revisions from Evolve.
Yeah.
And basically, the difference is, and if you have one there, I think I have one of the old ones, but
I don't know. That's probably barely going to be visible.
yeah, it's probably
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, it
Well,
looks
you can
like
kind of
crap.
see it up top of the top, but anyways, it's the contacts on the board that you're soldering to are actually gold plated, and something that I did notice on the big screen boards, I have a couple of them, the protectant that goes on the board, which was a pain in the ass in the 30s because sometimes they'd get them over the contacts and it was really hard to solder. If you've ever put any of them together, was a lot lighter. So that conform, I think it's what they call it, that goes on the board to pretty much makes the board waterproof, was a lot lighter on the big screen editions. But so if you get a board and you're ask your retailer, ask whoever you're getting it from, send them an email. Hey, do these have the gold contacts? So that way, because that will cut back on a lot of, especially if you're overseas, that will cut back on a lot of I just got this board in, and this one's doing the same thing. Well, for all you know, you could have gotten the original board from the same batch as the second one. So look for those gold contacts. Look for the larger screen editions. I think a lot of those have been almost flawless with any of the issues. So that's just a tip out there for people looking for the boards. So.
So let's jump to talking about nickel builds a little more. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but I know a lot of people have had questions, a lot of newbies. What's the best gauges for different applications? What's the best diameter of coils? Micro coils or spread apart coils? Angsty, why don't you start off with that since we haven't heard from you lately?
Sure. Some of the technical modder stuff I will definitely leave to Mast always. I mentioned this earlier. When you're building single coils, first of all, I thought nickel was going to be a lot worse to build with. I messed with it a little bit doing some non-res builds a long time ago on some different atties. I thought it was going to be a lot worse to build a whole coil out of. It's not that bad. If you're careful, you can thread your cotton. It's no big deal. Don't be scared of the nickel build because of that. I have found that it is really difficult to get enough coils in there in some instances. For example, if you're running dual coils on a dripper, you do need to have, in my opinion, you kind of need to have 30 gauge. I've been wrapping 30 gauge around a 3mm screwdriver or drill bit. That seems like it will get you to where you need to be. This one is 0.10 exactly.
And you said spaced out, right?
And I am running these things spaced out. I have tried them both ways. The other one seemed like it worked well at making regular contact or microcoil. That seemed like it did work okay, but the spaced out one, for whatever reason, seems like it works a little bit better for me. This one, I take it back. This one's actually a contact coil. I have been playing with it back and forth. So it does, and they do work. I mean, like, you probably see me vaping the same way. You get, just plumes of nice, thick, delicious vapor with really either. But if you're running duals, you're not going to be able to get enough coils in there with something, in my opinion, any bigger than 30, because otherwise
you can do it with 28. What happens when you get to 28, I think, is that you have so much wire mass,
right,
that despite the technology and the preheat, which when I run dual coils on a dripper, I run it at 40 watts and I set my temperature control.
Yep.
So I don't have much room for preheat, right? Because beyond that 40 watts, there's not a lot of amperage left for it to put out. But there's just so much wire to heat up that there's some ramp-up time, and even with that, you notice it. So that's why I've really moved to 30 gauge for all my dual coil builds. For duals, I don't bother to micro, and a lot of that is the atomizers that I'm using. Mm-hmm. So in the Marquee, it's not great with a 30 gauge micro, just the way it's designed, because your coil is so compacted. Then you have these really long trailing leads to either positive or negative connection. For me personally, with tanks, with a K-Fun, Elkonigan, Typhon, micro that all day long, single coil, 28 gauge, and it works really, really well.
What diameter are you doing those at?
When I wrap them, I usually use 2.5 or 3 millimeter and about 12 wraps of 28.
Yep.
And I get pretty good performance there. My Inax on mesh.
Yeah.
That's a pretty furry pussy you got there.
She likes to be wherever I am. My Inax, I use 28 or 30. It just kind of depends on what I grab first, and they both work pretty well. About 8 or 9 wraps a piece, and it puts me in that 0.1 range. I shoot for 0.15. That's where I shoot, and that seems to be where I have the best luck. Occasionally I'll get past that to 0.2, but most of my builds, just for whatever reason, come out to that 0.15, and it's pretty money.
Have any of you guys ever straighten your nickel wire? Like I've heard of some people doing that. They'll do it with a drill or something. I haven't tried that yet personally.
You mean twisting it?
Well, no, people straighten it.
Straighten it.
They'll just use. I think they just use it to clamp down on or something. But I haven't tried.
What you can do is you can take like a pliers, and I think they call it work hardening, and you basically will use like a flat pair of pliers or a nylon pair of pliers, and you hold it at one end and you use that and you run it down to, you could say straightening, but really what you're trying to do is that process ends up making the wire a bit more rigid, and that helps. For people that maybe are struggling with the really thin gauges of wire and trying to build, because I will admit that it's very easy to damage a 30 gauge coil because the wire is so flexible. Unlike Kanthal, Kanthal has a bit more, especially once you put heat to Kanthal, it really tends to retain that shape and lock
Certainly.
in. So what I have done, and this is not, it wasn't my idea, Mamu started doing it during the beta testing, is she took she took 2 strands of 34 gauge, twisted them together, and then she twisted 2 twisted strands. I'm lazy, so I just take
Yeah.
one long piece, double it over so I get to 4 strands, and then I just twist that together, and that seems to hold a little bit better, and it is less prone to collapsing or just getting pushed out around or into odd shapes.
Yeah, I've yet to play with some of that stuff, but I need to do it. Any of you other guys have some tips as far as builds go?
I'm running on my Derringer. I'm running. I just counted just to make sure, but I'm running a 8 wrap of 28 in dual coil, and that comes out to like a .07, and that's what I run on here. So that's really low, and I know that's coming close to the limits of the board, but and I have it as a contact, so dual coils at 8 wrap. And yeah, there is a little bit of a ramp up, but I think I'm cutting a lot of that back by having less wraps.
Yep.
So I don't know. I just build it. I keep the resistance in mind, but I'm building it and I taste it. I build it and I taste it, and then it really after screwing with the space coil the first time. I just ended up settling on this, and this is I'll usually build a longer one if I have space. The Derringer has space for usually typically an 11 or 12 wrap. 12, yeah, and that'll get you closer to the point 0.1 ohm area, and but like Basil said, you have more mass now, you have a lot more wire, so there is going to be a little bit. But even still, with my DNA, I usually will start firing about a second before the inhale. So I let that time frame there go.
That's key. Yeah, because firing it without any airflow is going to help accelerate you getting closer to your temp set point.
Right.
The biggest things you have to think about are, can you wick juice efficiently to the coil? So in some cases you're using maybe less wicking material than you were in the past. And 2, what does your airflow look like? Those are the 2 biggest things that ultimately, along with power, determine your wire temperature. So if you're struggling with a build, double check the amount of air that you're taking to the coil, and double check the wicking, because if you're choking that wicking off or you're jamming in lots, like if you're someone who used to build these ridiculous, 20 gauge and 22 gauge coils, and you would just jam a shitload of cotton in there because you had to try and keep juice near the coil, you got to rethink your build technique, because you want to be able to have efficient, heat moving the juice towards the hot spot of the coil.
Yeah.
It's a different method of building.
Yeah, I think wicking is definitely one of the biggest parts of it, and where the user error comes in the most. Not even with the coil build, but just because we hear constant different things. One person says to make pack the cotton in as tight as you can, and then another reviewer says to make it loose and be able to And so I think what I've learned is from my build so far is just the wicking and the amount of wick I put in there makes the biggest difference. So I think we just about covered all the important topics. I kind of wish we would have fought more. Robert,
I'll throw out one more somewhat build-related tip real quick. And I think this is something that maybe we haven't really touched on, and that is just the idea of that temperature message on the display, that you're temp limited or you're temp protected being a bad thing. Because I think a lot of people see that and they think they're doing something wrong, but really that's what the board is designed to do. So there's 2 ways that can occur. One, you'll get that message and you'll keep vaping, and you may not even notice that it happens, especially if you don't have a mod like a flask where it's basically shining in your eye because of the screen placement. But the other way that will happen is if there's something wrong with your build, your airflow, and your ability to wick, so that you fire it and you're immediately nearly hitting temp and you're really not getting any power delivery out. And sometimes you'll see that happen. You'll start to fire it, you'll see the wattage jump up, and then it drops down, and you'll see it at the end before you get that message firing at like 0.5.
Yeah.
If that's the case, you've done something wrong. I hate to say it, but you have. But what the board is doing is making sure that you are not exceeding that threshold. That threshold. At the end of the day, that's what the board is designed to do. So there's two ways that can affect you. One is really bad. One is the way the board is supposed to function.
And going along with that too is keep your legs as close keep your legs as close as possible. But yeah, keep your legs as short as possible, because that remember what the board is doing. The board is measuring resistance. So the longer those legs are, the higher the resistance is going to be. Okay, so on a build, and that really affects something like if you're going to go do a rebuild of your Aspire tank. Or you're doing a coil build that comes up and you have that leg that goes up, keep that in mind because that's going to affect it. So you might be reaching that temperature protection a lot quicker than you should be, right? Because that leg's heating up, so it's noticing that big resistance change and it's saying, oh, we're up to temp. No, not really. That coil hasn't been doing anything. So
that could be part of the reason that I dislike the Aspire tanks is because they do have those leads that aren't functionally vaping.
Yeah.
That are sticking out there. I don't know. Yeah. It's possible.
And that, and keep your atty clean and make sure that the screws and everything else. The best way that I could describe it is just imagine your Canthal build, but you have to be a lot more anal about it. Okay. Yeah. Your screws have to be tight. Your legs have to be nice and close. Your build has to be pretty neat for you to not have any issues with how that board is reading.
Yeah, I know. Making sure it's screws are tight and it's making good contact has been a big thing for some people, especially with 3-post atties where you got 2 wires going through that center post.
I think to that point, Matt said you need to keep the coils neat. I think that is true because I think I've seen problems with when I was first starting to build on it, where I was trying the micros and the non-contact coils, and I found that if you have like a combination of those, like if you deform the coil when you're threading a new wick or whatever, I've had where I started seeing some really weird stuff happen as I'm vaping, and I pulled apart and I look at it and I found out that I had a couple of the coils kind of touching and the rest of them not, because it got jacked up as I was rewicking. I think some of that stuff makes it go a little funky, so maybe pick one.
Yeah. My final thought on the DNA 40.
Well, let's go through and let's have everybody give their final thoughts and kind of what they, if they would suggest it to those people that are on the fence, or any warnings or pros or cons. Robert, let's go ahead and start with you.
The Evolve DNA 40 has got to be one of the best 40-watt mods out there. Period, bar none. If you buy it for Temperature Protect, it sucks. All right, but it's a 40-watt mod with all the new feature enhancements. Stellar. Buy it. That's it. That's all I have really to say.
There you go.
Steve, what are your thoughts?
We didn't cover a couple of things that are a little bit of a niggle for me, and I'll summarize them here because it's relevant of whether or not I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I think I would agree with Robert in that it's a really, really good standard. I would say a standard Evolve, good quality board for Canthal. Works great if you want 40 watts. I think it works really, really well. I'm excited about the temperature control thing, but some of the funky little glitches that you get here with determining whether or not it's a new coil to being in voltage versus wattage, the screen scrambling, and I personally have not seen it happen with extreme weather conditions, either hot or cold. It's done it inside. So some of those things, specifically in the temperature control mode, I'm a little hesitant. I find the DNA 30 to be a much more consistent, bang on, always works, and so if you're wanting to just do nickel, I think this is fun to play with. I like it. I hope they release a version 2 that I think is a little more mature on the software side, but I'm kind of not really gonna strongly recommend it for the temperature control thing.
Masked, how about you?
Well, from a modder's perspective and from modder's side, I think depending on what you build in, okay, so what you're putting your DNA 40s into, if you have any concerns about it, build a few, give them out to beta testers, okay. Yeah, the board was beta tested already, but how about beta tested in your mod? I think that's going to be an issue always. Get into the groups, the Facebook groups, all that stuff. Ask for information. People will be helpful. For example, like the thing with the gold contacts. If you're into modding and you're going to be doing 100 mods, you really want to make sure that you don't have any of those coming back. So I think just learning, picking up information from that. And also educate yourself as much as possible on, okay, so this is the way that other people are building coils. If I have people who are going to buy a mod from me, maybe that's something that you could put down on a sheet of paper, or something that you give them when you sell the mod to them. Hey, these are things that have worked for people. These are things that haven't really worked. You're welcome to try all of them, but this will cut back on some of the misconceptions or errors that you might be getting when you receive the mod. Which I think that if you give people the information, you'll get a lot less issues coming back. About the board, I think the board is great. I think we're moving in the right direction with the technology. Are we 100% there yet? No. There's always going to be bugs into this. I'm hoping that with the big screen version, even though it was thought about before, it wasn't like they released a big screen version to fix everything. I think the big screen version of the DNA 40 is hopefully going to reform to the level of that we've held Evolve at with the DNA 30. Something rock solid. Does it look like the jitterbug version that some people are calling it because it's gigantic and it's used for people who can't really see? So maybe in the next iterations of the boards they'll have some of the smaller screen boards, because let's face it, for a 40-watt device, one of the draws to the DNA 40 was the size of the board, the size of the screen.
Yeah.
And the fitment, it works great in tubes. It's perfect. So, I don't want the fix to be the big board, right? And the big screen be the end all for Evolve. I want to see the board with the smaller screen, maybe a small detachable screen with a longer ribbon or something like that. Give you a little bit now that they have the detachable screen versions. So.
On a side note, Flitzy's been commenting in chat about how you wore sleeves today and you prettied up your hair. So.
Oh yeah, I got a haircut and it's pretty cold. It's probably in my house right now. It's probably like 59, 60. So.
You're definitely looking pretty fancy.
Thanks, appreciate it. Had to get fancied up to be in a big timer show.
I'm just a wax statue sitting here.
Yep.
So, Basil, your last but not least, what are your final thoughts?
Now I can rebut everyone. Yeah. No, I will say the big screen has nothing to do with a fix. It's a separate board, and it was designed later. It's the only one that right now has the detachable screen, so it wasn't necessarily like done as a combatant to try and fix any issues that they were having. It's a separate offering. That being said, again, in front of me I've got 5 different devices with DNA 40s, which means I have at least 5 different atomizers built with nickel. On my desk right now I do not have a single atomizer that is built with Canthal. I love it. It's everything that I've wanted. I love the preheat. I love the temperature control. I haven't had a single burnt wick since probably September, I think it was, late September, early October. I got my hands on the beta.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's perfect. It's everything that I've wanted, and I get a great vape. That being said, I would love like another 10 to 15 watts out of it for those dual coil setups. I would like that. I don't need it. I would like that.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. I think
you're going to see that. I think you've all got something up their sleeve with a higher wattage board.
Possibly the DNA 50.
NDAs.
Well,
I'm not under anything other than the beta for this. I will tell you, I did beta test for the kick. So I've talked to Brandon a lot over the years. Like before, when Brandon wanted to tell me that I was going to get added to the beta, he called my cell phone. So like I have Brandon's number, he has my number. Not saying that we talk all the time. I haven't actually talked to him since I got my beta device, but just
Would
knowing
you
the
mind
way
slipping Brandon my number?
we'll see. We'll see what can be done. But just knowing the way Brandon's mind works, he's probably got 4 or 5 steps ahead already in his mind, knowing what he wants to do. So, it just so happens that he went 20, 30, 40. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that he's probably got the next 3 or 4 big release products already planned out. It's a matter of timing, technology, and development. He's a smart man.
I would like to say 2 additional things. One, Candy just mentioned the same thing. So this whole show, you guys have been talking about the painting that you've got behind you licking your ear, Matt. And I've been trying to.
That again?
Yeah. But also, you said Basil was last but not least. But you need to give your final thoughts too on your buy, no buy.
Yep. Buy. Yeah, I just bought the E7 Sunbox directly from Paulo. I was sent a flask for review. I went out and bought a second one. So I have 2. And what I really, really, really want, I have very few wants in the vaping world because, like I said, I'm sitting 5 DNA 40s, a DNA 30 max Addies for days. The one thing that I really want is a 0 with a DNA 40, a legit 0 with a DNA 40.
Oh, God, me too.
You and me both. Let's not go there. I know Basil's going to say that he wants to buy it, but I want to know what Matt's final thoughts, because Basil's not last. Matt has put himself last, but
if you talk to Vaping Shaza, he'll tell you all you have to do is review the clone
and then beat it to death.
Yeah, buy a clone,
on your
throw it in a
video,
bucket of water and beat it.
Yeah.
And then Carlos will send you a mod. I messaged him just asking when the next list was, and he didn't give me the time of day.
A custom engraved one, no less.
My final thoughts. I'll say, you guys are all smarter than me on this issue probably, but I think that, like I said, I'm on the fence with it. The newest Vapor Shark with the big screen, I've had it for a week and a half. I've been running it in temp mode, no problems. I have been using the zip charger that's, makes it charge in an hour and a half. Not to say it's not going to creep up on me later. I think that the future of this technology stems on the Farsalino study. Plain and simple, if Farsalinos comes out and says, hey, above 450 degrees, it could be hazardous, Evolve sales are just going to go through the roof, and so, and everybody and their mother's going to be coming out with other boards and stuff that are doing this. As far as somebody thinking about buying it, just expect that there's going to be a learning curve. Expect that you might get frustrated at first. Expect that it's different. It's definitely different than building with Kanthal. That being said, I think that it's great that there's more and more, stuff like the sub-tank heads coming out where you don't have to rebuild and stuff like that for maybe newer people that aren't ready to get into rebuilding yet.
Or dumb old crap heads like me.
Yeah, or old farts that are blind like Robert. So, I'm kidding, Robert. I love you. You were really tame though tonight. Did you get stoned before the show?
No.
Did anybody else have anything else they want to touch on?
This was about information.
I know, it was good. I think we achieved that. It was fair and balanced, like Fox News.
Like Fox. Exactly like Fox News.
Well, the surveys say Fox News is fairly centrist, but the surveys are only worth as much as the people they surveyed. So there you go.
That's it, right?
Well, definitely thanks to all you guys for coming on. It's been interesting for sure. I've learned some stuff. Thanks to everybody for watching another episode, and we will be back next Wednesday.
Peace out, y'all.